Welcome to the Church of Mabus radio show. It's Friday night, 7:01 p.m. Central. Actually, that clock is wrong. It's 7:07 p.m. Central. I'm trying to get all my clocks synced around here. You would think the computer one that does it automatic would be right. I don't know. The one over here is right. 7:08 p.m. Central. You're listening to United Public Radio, 107.7 FM New Orleans. And it's good to be here. We got Christina Giordano here with us tonight. Jay went camping in Georgia, and Jay actually had seen. He always tells this story. He saw a Bigfoot once looking in a window, but maybe he'll run into Bigfoot out there. Who knows? But he's in Georgia camping, and hopefully he brought mosquito repellent. But Christina's here with us tonight, and she's filling in. Christina, good to have you here.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
And she's
Actually,
returning. She's
it's an
done an
awesome
interview
show.
before. She's done an interview before, and she's going to sit in. And we got Mark Nelson here tonight. How's it going, Mark? Good to have you here.
Great, nice to be here, Jeffrey.
And you're in Hong Kong right now, right?
Indeed, yeah. So it's 12 hours ahead of Eastern Standard Time, so it's Saturday for me.
Nice. So I guess my initial question: what got you on this path of shamanism? What was the catalyst? What was the start of it all?
So that's a very big question, and it can be a lengthy answer. I've essentially been involved in this all my life. I started having very interesting visionary experiences when I was very young, as a lot of children do. And some people grow out of that, and with others, it stays with them throughout their life. And I always had this calling, if you like, to experience the supernatural, explore that, and get more involved. And I've done that on and off over my life, but I started taking it really seriously about 25 years ago. Stepped fully into the shamanic path, and as soon as you start accepting the calling from spirit, then things start lining up and you're presented with opportunities, and you gradually step more firmly onto that particular path. So I did a lot of training in the US with the Foundation for Shamanic Studies, and I've been working with people basically all over the world. I've been a practitioner myself now for 12 years or so. So I have a large number of students, some apprentices, and we'll be doing some online workshops towards the end of this year. So it's been something that's been there all my life, essentially, and I'm now becoming more fully engaged with the topic.
And did you had spiritual experiences? What were some of that, like dreams? I mean, what can you tell us about some of the experiences that you first had that was awakening to the spirit?
So mine are very visionary, and I used to have quite a visionary experience in waking real life. I would see animals, especially the wolf, when I was very young. Wolf is one of my power animals. I'm looking at the wolf on your T-shirt now, which is a nice synergy. And I also had visions of, if you like, beings who are hovering over buildings in midair, say. So you know that that's something that's not normal. You learn not to discuss that with adults at a fairly young age. And you then know that there is something different. And no matter what else happens to you, you're aware that there is another aspect of reality that is there, and you either explore it or you don't. And some people have similar experiences and then don't follow up on that. And then some people do, and they sort of move more firmly into it.
What kind of beings were they? One of my big experience was light beings. What were your type of beings?
Yeah, so mine seemed to have a religious bent to them. So there was one female angelic figure. I see other figures that I take to be biblical. But I resonate as well with the description of beings of light. That's another common thing. As you get more into this path, you tend to attract spirits, and you attract other experiences to you, and things become more apparent. So as you work more with spirits, you become more used to them being there, you sense them, you start seeing things over time as well. A lot of people have sensory experience of touch, usually around the head, especially around the ears and the back of the neck. So I experience all of those things, as do other people I know. So it's everything from hearing things, clear audience, to seeing, to feeling, or just knowing that they're there. A lot of intuition comes into this as well. You learn to sort of experience when spirits are present, when they're not. I always know if I get ringing in the ears or a buzzing in the head, that's a sure sign that there is something going on. And I've been doing some ritual this morning, so I have exactly those symptoms now.
I understand what you mean about the touch. That's I've said it feels like God or a great spirit putting his hand and just touching you. It's seeing, and that's I can relate to that for sure. And one of my big experiences has been beings of light. I've seen them in so many weird ways, completely sober. I've seen them not sober, but I've actually, there was a, one of the big ones I had was at Silver Lake, completely sober. I had put on this watchword Bible thing. I grew up Christian. I believe that there's Christ consciousness and truth in there. I've studied, shamanism. I love Norse stuff and Native American stuff. But I was listening to the Bible that day on DVD, on TV, and something told me to go outside and look in the sky. So I went outside, I looked towards the house I had been in. I saw two beings of light leave the house and fly into the heavens. And it was as if they were in the house and were leaving. And you couldn't see their faces, like eyes and stuff, but they were humanoid. And I've seen them many times in the heavens, like almost like a star, but it's more than a star. I've seen one fly across the air like freaking Superman while I was sitting Indian style. And I've seen them many times, and that's one of my big experiences. And I've also seen some weird UFO stuff. But part of me wonders if, I know you've heard of luminous beings in shamanism, I'm sure. And if it's that, but is it us without our bodies? I've heard aliens, angels, and then I wonder too if it's us without our bodies. Is that what we are? Is that what I'm seeing? Is that something that rings true to you with some of these beings that you've seen or beings of light?
So there's obviously many theories about this, about what their true nature is, what kind of spirit they are, if indeed they are spirit sometimes. A lot of this stuff is illogical and you can't understand it mentally. So the more you try and understand it, the more nebulous it becomes in some sense. And I've learned over the years not to be too fussed about trying to understand at the nth degree exactly what these things are. I know they're there. I work with things. I'm interested in exploring them, and I don't get too hung up on that mental understanding piece. And that's something I try and impress on my students as well. Don't think about that. Actually, go with the experience and step into it, and then see where that takes you, and see how you can benefit from that. I find that a useful way of approaching them.
Definitely, definitely, and also you have to wonder if we are these energy beings. If when we sleep, if we all kind of project out into the cosmos or something. I think I've seen visions of that where you kind of see into that realm that's around the earth where we possibly go when we die as well. Uh, but yeah, I've asked so many guests trying to figure out what it is, and that you're probably right. That's something I need to work on, because you can go crazy thinking about this stuff too much, trying to figure it
Exactly.
out.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's where I'm at. but as far as and how did you come about finding, let's say, your animal spirits? Did you have experiences, or did you seek that out to find out what they were?
So it works both ways. Some people know what their animals are. So when I was very young, I used to see the wolf in my bedroom. I used to wake up and it was there. My parents couldn't see it, but I certainly could. And so when that became a power animal, that was no big surprise. I always knew that that was one of them. What usually happens is you go to a workshop, or you go to an introductory session with a practitioner, and they will do the power animal retrieval for you. And the traditional wisdom is that you accept whatever animal you're given. So you may think that something else is an animal, and it may well be, because we all have more than one power animal. But certain animals will come into your life at certain points for particular reasons, to give you some of their abilities, to benefit you in ways that are unique to that animal. So with the animals, you tend to have multiple. I have four, one of which I only use for certain types of ritual related to death. The other three I work with more regularly. And some people have these animals or other spirits that are quite specific for a particular purpose, for a certain type of healing, for instance, and that's quite common. You can retrieve your own power animals, and this is one of the things that I explain in the book. about how you can actually go about doing that yourself. So some people think that that's not something that you can do, but in fact, if you sort of put your mind to it to think about how you could do that shamanically, indeed, it is possible to do it.
I know Christina has a lot of weird stuff with owls. Like I've never seen an owl ever, but when she's around, like there's an owl, I've seen them in the tree. She's taking pictures of them. I'm like, I never see owls, but for some reason where I'm at here, you hear them so much it's creepy at night. Like it's scary. Like it's you get over it, but there's a lot of them. When you have little dogs and stuff, you worry. That's why it's kind of like a horror movie too. But there's a lot of owls here. She must have owl medicine for sure. And I've heard that owl medicine, like some people have that with alien encounters, and there's whole books about alien encounters and owls and stuff like that as well. So owls pretty interesting and definitely weird.
Yeah, owls, like all birds, are messengers. Owls are traditionally associated with death in some sense. So their presence usually means that there's an imminent death. That's a traditional sort of interpretation of the presence of owl. But it doesn't always mean that every time you see an owl that somebody's going to die, of course. But they are interesting. But the main thing with birds is they are messengers, and that's the key thing to learn from their presence.
Cool. And I'd mentioned briefly, me and Christina were at a house and we are doing hospice care. I'd never done that kind of stuff before. She's a nurse. She's done it before. And her grandmother transitioned. And then there was the mother that, was having trouble there with her and she left. And we had to come here with the house troubles. But that house, for some reason, and we had some weird experiences there. And we've both had weird experiences all our life. But some of the experiences there, like there was a glass that blew up. I'd never seen anything like that. And I tried to explain it away with science or whatever, but it was still weird because Christina was the only one near it. It wasn't hot then cold. It was a strong crystal glass that just blew up for no reason. And maybe there's a scientific explanation, but it was still weird. Like it reminded me of every horror movie you ever see, and you're like, "Uh-oh, this is not going to have a good ending." But anyway, and there was something that hit the bed there, and I got up with a flashlight and looked around, and I could not find. I thought something fell off the shelf and hit it. No, and this was after her grandmother passed, and I don't know if it was the grandmother or not. We have theories about that, but we also, once we moved here, we have an RV here. Something slapped the RV when we were trying to sleep. That was weird, and maybe there's an explanation for it. I don't know what it was. But another thing that we've had at the weird house, I jokingly say Amityville house. I shouldn't say that probably, but there was there was
You usually say Death House. Amity
yeah.
sounds better. So.
It was creepy there, but there was a lot of weird experiences there where I would let the sun fill me with white light, and I have spiritual experiences when I do that. Like I was in the gym with her and I saw a pink orb over everybody in the gym, and for some reason it's like the sun is, I don't know, I'm not Superman, that's for sure. I'm gonna look more like Lex Luthor probably, but anyway, I've had sun experiences, and one day I saw a gray standing over the grandmother in the bed, and she's sick, and passing away. And it kind of looked out like I was surprised I saw it. And then Christina saw one standing over me, and they seem like kind of astral, like they don't seem physical or anything. They seem kind of like bugs or something. Like I don't know what the hell they were, but they give me the creeps. But anyway, and we've been having a lot of stuff, health stuff, anxiety. I've been having blood pressure stuff, IBS stuff, just, and a lot of it seems like I've had stuff before, but a lot of it happened at that house, and we're just a lot of stress. And me and her want to do some stuff on with some book writing and some, possibly a YouTube channel and stuff to bring, the word to the spirit and help people and things like that. So sometimes we, wonder, I mean, we know it seems like spiritual warfare. I try not to get too paranoid about it, but when you feel like crap a lot and have weird things, you're like, this doesn't feel positive. So I know there's things that you've spoke about in your book and that about, like, is it the parasitical? And we're just trying to figure out how to keep these things away from you and, boost your energy to keep them away. And we try different things, meditations and, I have affirmations and oracle cards and try to do stuff, but you still have them. I'd love for it to go away. But what can you tell us about that kind of stuff? I know there's a lot, but that could help
Sure.
us possibly.
So let's deal with two separate things. One is the property and the other is the greys. I'll come back to them. So for properties, certain properties, because of where they're sited, perhaps in relation to geopathic stress areas, underground black streams, there are certain locations where properties are going to pick up, for want of a better word, negative energy. We shouldn't use that term, but let's use that for now. So there are several reasons why, just because where a property is situated, it's going to pick up energy. That may also happen due to past events in the vicinity of the property. So historical battles, accidents, other types of events will also generate that kind of energy. The inhabitants can then sort of also add to that. So if there are things that have gone on in a property that are, violent, etc., that's also going to add to this. And what can happen over time is that the property will gather energy and the energy will grow within that property. In the same way that an altar in a church will collect energy and grow in power over time, the same can happen with the more negative energy. That energy creates a certain tension, and it can result in manifestations like objects breaking or objects flying across. And I've seen things fly across the room, and it's interesting. That does prove that there is something going on. Again, is that entirely due to a supernatural reason? It could be any number of combination of things that are happening. But typically, when you get object movement or object breakage, I would say that it's more likely due to this buildup of energy. Some of it is real world events as well. So very often people interpret things that are happening as supernatural, but in fact they have a, quite a normal explanation to them. So that's with the property. What can you do about properties? One thing is to actually get the property cleared. The way that you typically do that is you do physical clearing and you do energetic clearing as well. You would usually use elements to do that. So you basically work your way around the house with incense, with water, with salt, representing the element earth. So we're using the elements to drive energy around a property and out of the property. So you would start at the bottom left-hand corner of the front door, work your way around the building, visiting all the corners. You end up at the right-hand side of the front door, and you're driving that energy out. So that works quite well to actually get rid of a lot of static energy that's actually in the property. Now, the other issue over and above that is the presence of spirits that may be causing an issue for whatever reason, and there are numerous ways that can occur. So one is that it may be human ghosts who are resident in the property, who are confused about where they are. They're actually in the spiritual aspect of the middle world. They would lose sentience over time anyway, so they get more and more confused, and they can have an effect. There may also be other types of spirits. So you may have local spirits of the land, for instance, especially if it's a rural property, who may well not understand the presence of people on structures, especially new ones. And you often get the situation where people sometimes ask me to clear spirits from a property, and I have to explain to them that that's actually not the right thing to do, because those spirits are resident there. If they're not malignant, then you shouldn't try and remove them, but you have to figure out how you come more into relationship with them. So as you can see, this is a very complex question. It involves lots of real world things, some more supernatural things, and different ways of approaching it, from working with physical clearing and energetic clearing to doing work with the spirits, and that work can vary. So the best way to do this, if you've got a property that's suffering that sort of thing, is get somebody to come in and do this work for you. And you'll find people advertising that sort of service. If you can't, I can maybe recommend some people in Florida to you. And I can also send you some guidelines on actually how to do that kind of work as well, if you want to have a go at it yourself. So that's the property piece. As far as the aliens are concerned, and this is a fascinating, huge subject that we haven't got time to explore, unfortunately, there are two schools of thought about the Greys. One is that they are similar to the other aliens. The other is they're engineered beings. So their appearance, metallic. You've seen this theory that it says that they've been engineered so they can withstand space flight, and they're artificial in some sense. I think there's some credence in that theory, actually, and that does make some sense. The other is, though, that they are spiritual beings rather than real world entities. And so, which is true, or is both true? I was at a workshop once where Michael Harner, who's very famous for his book Way of the Shaman, was asked the question, "What are aliens?" And he thought about it for a very long time, and then said, "I believe that they're middle world entities." And that was a very interesting answer, very very well phrased. And it does leave open the possibility that they are middle world entities in terms of being physical beings, and or they are middle world beings in terms of being spiritual and existing in the spiritual aspect of the middle world. Again, it's one of these areas where it's very difficult to know what the truth is. It's a fascinating topic. I look forward to seeing what's going to happen in the future with this, because as you can see, there are more and more announcements coming out from official sources about UFOs, about alien presence, and one interpretation is that the population is being set up for a more general announcement about that over time. So it's an interesting sort of topic, and one that I watch as well. So I was interested to see that you cover that on your show.
Yes, it definitely. I've had some UFO stuff many times, seeing weird stuff in the sky. I don't know if I've ever been taken by anything, but I've seen weird stuff, and I've had friends say, "They look, Jeffrey, they're here because of you." I don't know if that was true or not, but I've definitely seen some weird UFO stuff. And yeah, lately the subject is all over the news. And I've interviewed people from Stanton Friedman, nuclear physicist, to Nick Pope. One of the ones I tell a lot of people about is Captain Robert Salas, who was on that. He's still enlisted in the Air Force, and he wrote a book about UFOs shutting down the missile silos at a base. So it's definitely a crazy subject right now. And if you keep up with all of it, it's like a weird sci-fi horror movie. But it's fun, especially when you've been doing it this long. But yeah, I don't know. Those grays are definitely creepy. One of my bigger experiences that I had, and I saw these with a friend, were some small little cloaked beings in the woods standing around a black box. And I jokingly said Jawas, but they weren't that fat. They were slender and small, and there was a black box. And during that time, I had read books about the Celtic otherworld and fairies and things like that. So maybe they were something like that. A cat jumped towards them and they vanished. And me and a friend saw them, and we were both like, "Do you see that?" "Yeah." "Do you see that?" We both saw it. And a cat jumped towards them, a black cat, and they vanished. And I know you get into fairies and stuff. And the only reason I think they could have been well, some people think fairies may be aliens too. Like there's weird connections with that. But what's some of the stuff you get into with fairies in your book?
Yeah, so there's a lot of theories about fairies as well in terms of what they are. Everything from supernatural beings to human creatures that have retreated into the underworld and appear occasionally. So there's about 15 different sort of mainstream theories of the nature of fairies. I think they're interesting. They clearly have a very close association with nature, and nature is very important in shamanism and in most spiritual work. We do different types of work with fairies. Some of it is sort of trying to develop relationships with fairy helping spirits, which is quite interesting. And certain people have an affinity with that and resonate very strongly with them and are very drawn to that work. There are some things you have to be a bit careful about with fairies, though. Some of the common wisdom, again, is that you can never break a promise with a fairy. So you have to be very careful what you promise them. That's probably true of all spirits, actually, but more so with fairies. So some people inadvertently get on their wrong side, and this is very easy to do. It's very easy to break taboos or do things that you don't understand are actually going to be frowned upon by the spirits. And that can have some unintended consequences. But they are interesting to work with. The work that I've done with them is mainly to do with nature. We have done some work with them that is more to do with horses, and we touch on that a bit in the book. So they obviously have a lot of knowledge about horses. Some of the mythology about fairies relates to people working with them for crop or livestock rituals. So the idea is that you're doing work with the fairies to increase the sort of yield of the crop, or indeed you're looking to increase the fertility or the stamina of a herd by introducing a fairy animal into a real herd. So that's quite interesting. Sometimes if you're in the forest, I don't know if you've seen this or not, Jeffrey, you occasionally see animals that have red eyes, and that's a sure sign that that animal, one, is not a normal physical animal, and two, it may well be a fey creature, because the fairy animals often have red eyes and often red fur as well. So a fairy bull may well have that appearance, for instance.
Yeah, it's definitely a fascinating subject. And I've seen the pictures and some video of people that have claimed they're real images. Some of them are pretty interesting. And then there's orbs and stuff. Maybe that's them. I don't know, but there's different theories to that as well. And have you ever seen the artist Brian Froud that does all the fairy art and stuff? You know, Dark Crystal. Those are the fairies I like. That seems kind of like that could be accurate almost. Like it's so weird and strange. Like the Dark Crystal.
That's one of the things that's quite interesting, the way that a lot of things from mythology or from different spiritual traditions are finding their way into modern media, and whether that's films or television or games, you see a lot of these things actually coming through in art forms of one type or another, which is quite an interesting development.
Yeah, I know that guy has some oracle cards and books and stuff. Those are pretty beautiful art for sure. Christina, did you have a particular question you'd like to ask?
Well, it's pretty interesting. He was talking about having. I'm also into embracing roots more and more, learning why I do things maybe the way I do it, trying to find healing for hopefully myself and future generations. And you said something about the wolf and the eagle and the owl, and it's pretty interesting to see again how many different cultures and different religions and all different things have very similar parallels again, where just pretty much even Jeffrey was telling stories about the house and just kind of seeing different things that makes me feel I feel a fear, but it's mostly like in the human brain, more like trying to understand what is it that's going on, especially scientifically trying to understand, but also being very open-minded and spiritually open to learning. That basically, like the glass, for example, that blew up, I had just been focusing my energy on that glass, and specifically was washing dishes in the kitchen. And I had gave grandma and mom their fruit cocktail in the same glass, similar glass, and literally was looking at it and thinking, I hope that isn't getting too hot and I'm not going to be able to have it. And it goes, so it's like, he always says no one was in there. It's like, I was, but it was crazy. Like, I don't know what happened. And literally no one got hurt, thankfully, but there was glass everywhere. And I remember thinking that was odd, but I've had other similar times in my life where I've had high energy, let's just say maybe getting angry and upset in my mind, and glass blowing up, bulbs blowing or whatnot. So just trying to learn, I guess, how much that we maybe have effect on what's around us, our energy for sure, and how that feeds into it. And I think you said something maybe we've been always doing maybe wrong. We need to change our way we're doing it, is, saging, going around a house and trying to kind of get it to go away. Maybe that's my Pentecostal roots, to kind of be like, let's get these things out of here. But how that maybe could actually create more hostility, how it could cause a fight, instead of actually, yes, I really do want to learn how to work with the spirit guides that are there. Like being said, I've never seen grays. I've felt and seen things my whole life and been very scared of the church, the medical world, so on, locking me up, giving me meds, and saying I'm crazy. But I've been praying for someone like you actually to come along and somehow help me to feel like I'm not crazy, and to be able to learn to use all of these years of experience as a nurse and seeing and feeling all of these things still going on. Even we are no longer in the house he was talking about, where there was a lot of weird stuff going on. But I think it did have to do with, we were in a 55 and older community. There was a lot of people passing away there frequently. And yes, a labor and delivery nurse typically, so bringing life into the world, and I was taking care of grandma who did have dementia, and she progressed pretty quickly. And my mother has a lot of mental health issues, and she was having a lot of horrific dreams, or it sounded like she was being like ripped to pieces by literally something in her sleep all the time, like very scary. There was abuse and weirdness going on there in the past as well, trauma and so on. Even with somebody across the water, if that makes sense, our neighbor was an uncle, where there's weird history there between him and my mother. And I think there was a lot of things just linked to all of that, if that makes sense. Almost kind of poltergeisty, scary, weird things, but all based on negative energy. And even when grandma passed in July, right after that, literally, is when I had a nightmare. I literally could see my grandma. We were doing her postmortem care, that last little bit of seeing her, and I rolled her over in my dream, and basically something hit the bed right then and woke us up. And it was one of those, like, I felt afraid, and now I'm feeling almost like grandma was doing that, as weird as it is, almost trying to tell me, don't you think of that right now, right before you're going to sleep. And she wants us to think about positive things or something, if that makes sense. So after getting out of that house and being able to get away from, yes, sadly, abuse and wildness, childhood trauma being triggered, somehow he and I being able to leave that negativity there, or whatever that is, even from our past, both of us, he and I both have gone through horrific trauma as children and so on, to basically try to use our gifts, if there's a way that we can be shaman, to help other people through all of the hell, literally, we've gone through on Earth. And I don't know, like, I'm starting to finally be like, I'm not scared of any of this. Like, usually when I see owls, I'm in the graveyard. I love graveyards, but I feel like home there, if that makes sense. And I go in there, and yeah, like, I've seen so many owls fly right over my head in the daytime, and my dogs actually are right in front of me, the little ones, and almost kind of telling me, yeah, we could eat them, but we're not going to. I don't know how to explain it. I'm like, why are you out in the daytime, first of all? But it's almost like, we're watching your back and we're here to help you. And I kind of just feel like there's an eagle and an owl link, and I'm a night nurse, primarily the weirdo night nurse. So I feel always kind of this walk between worlds. I've had 2 losses as babies, in utero. Weirdly, you brought up the owl. So I'm like, okay, I'm in the graveyard, and yeah, I've had 2 fetal losses. So I feel like, yes, I'm always literally between, like, 1 foot literally in death and 1 foot in this world. And somehow we're always in heaven if our spirit is connected to our inner child, if that makes sense. And literally moving out to Florida from Washington State, I went through New Orleans, and I think did my shadow work. Literally, like, my suppressed child was hiding in the catacombs of New Orleans. And basically, I brought that home with me. I thought it was something demonic or bad, and I went to fight it at the house, and it actually hugged me, and it felt like a little child of myself, and I hugged it, and I felt this weird completeness that I'm like, okay, I don't know how to explain it. That was good. But just all these things happening for a reason, basically, is how I feel. I want to say it's scary because, yeah, it logically doesn't make any sense, but honestly believe everything happens for reasons. Synchronicity is the word, right? And basically, even getting to meet you and talk about all of this, learn to use the totem. That's like totally, yes, the wolf and even the berserker we talk about all the time. Those are like parts of us being able to embrace that that animal spirit, basically, almost like they do help us. And that's in our native roots as well. And just basically trying to learn how to see it as not scary and not having to fight so hard. I think I've wasted too much of my life. I'm almost 40, and I'm like, I'm exhausted because I've been fighting my whole life trying to run from being locked up and basically put on meds. And I'm not the typical nurse. I'm all about, like, yes, let's figure out how to fix this, like how to heal the root, not just throw more meds at it or whatever. And dealing with, literally for the first in my life, even recent, my own issues with depression and sadly thoughts of suicide after all the years of, that's my mission, to help other people not get to that point, not to become hopeless. And no joke, being in the graveyard again. And I swear I saw something looks like Anubis legs or something. Exactly. I picture like Anubis legs. It was not normal. And I was like, okay, I'm not doing it. I don't know what's waiting for me over here, but I'm not ready to go yet. And definitely, again, give me that mission to say, how can I help people? There is something that seems dark in this world, and I don't know how to explain it. How do we not add to that darkness? How do we not allow it to take away our gifts, basically? I think that we're supposed to use to help others.
Yeah, so there's some wonderful insights there, Christina, and it's really good that your sort of instinctive thought is, how can I actually help other people? And it's so nice to hear people say that. That's really good. Let me try and sort of pick a few of the things that you were talking about, because there's some really interesting stuff in that. This not being afraid of things is really important, and a lot of people get spooked by anything that is to do with spirit, to do with the supernatural, anything that goes against very ingrained teaching that they have from their culture, from their church, from their family. And it's important to be open to explore this stuff. Some of it may resonate with you, may be right for you, some of it won't, but it will be right for other people. It's important not to feel sort of that fear, to try and overcome that. The issue with mental illness is one that I sort of have some sympathy with. A lot of the symptoms that people have when they experience certain forms of spiritual calling is very close to, what people would call mental illness. So it's something that I'm quite familiar with. At one stage in my life, I felt that I was going mad, actually. And you realize that no, actually, it's not. It's something else that's happening, and it's not something that in all people should be medicated. But I'm not at all suggesting that medication doesn't have a role to play, obviously. And one of the things we're very keen to do is not to recommend anything that goes against conventional medicine. So from a shamanic healing point of view, we must always make that clear distinction. As a nurse, you're obviously aware that very interesting things happen in hospitals, and certain beds in hospitals have a higher incidence of relapse rate, or indeed of mortality. And, a lot of nurses are very familiar with that. And there are some odd things that happen in hospitals purely because of the nature of what's happening. So you've got a lot of trauma, you've got a lot of people who are dying, often in unexpected ways, and that creates certain energetic disturbances that sort of lead to this confusion, if you like, in energy around hospitals, and higher incidence of certain types of things. So it's an interesting place to try and work, and congratulations for actually doing that work. It must be very interesting and empowering for you. The situation you described where you embraced a child and you thought that you were perhaps dealing with a shadow element, that actually may have been a soul retrieval that you were inadvertently doing on yourself, because where you suffer soul loss, where people go and retrieve those soul parts for you, they often present themselves as younger versions of the person. And often when I hear that people are experiencing things where they're meeting younger versions of themselves in dream, or in vision, or in shamanic journey or meditation, and they're merging with that thing, that may very well relate to a sort of soul retrieval that is happening inadvertently, or that you're somehow triggering without being conscious that it's that's actually going on. So that there's a whole bunch of really interesting stuff that you had, and I want to just try and sort of pull out some of the highlights. The other interesting thing you spoke about, Christina, was ancestry, and it has a huge impact on us. And we're all admixed, so the three of us on this call have interesting roots. Jeffrey and I are both Celtic. I have Viking ancestry as well. And we inherit things from all of those ancestors, both positive and negative. And one of the interesting things to do is to try and work with the ancestors who can help us. And when we work with ancestral spirits, some of them are helping spirits, some of them are not, some of them are hanging around as ghosts, so we don't want to work with them. But we can do work with the ancestors, we can heal them. And the fascinating thing about ancestral healing is that if you do healing on a family line, you're healing the past, the present, and the future at the same time. So it's very, very powerful work, potentially. Now, it does create an interesting issue, though. One of the things that I often talk about is the ethics of any form of healing work. And we have to be very careful that what we're doing is correct, that we have permission to do it, and that the recipients of the healing understand, the work and potential impact it can have on them. When we do work like ancestral healing, that we know is going to affect many descendants, we cannot possibly obtain permission from them. So in doing that work, we are intentionally engaging almost in sorcery, because we are doing something that we know is slightly grey in terms of its ethical impact, but we're weighing that against the greater good of working with, first of all, the person, typically a client that has asked us for ancestral healing. That often involves healing ancestors who are stuck in the middle world as ghosts and healing them as well. So we're trying to walk this fine line between what is the right way to proceed in this particular situation. And sometimes that is not entirely clear. And as long as we're aware and just trying to use our best intention to do what we think is correct or intuitively feel is correct in a particular situation, I think that's maybe the best that we can do. So good luck with whatever path you try and follow. And I'd encourage you, try a few things and see what resonates with you. And don't be too hung up on one thing. If it doesn't work, try something else. Don't do too many things, but by all means, good luck with what you're going to do. Sorry, Jeffrey.
Oh, I was just going to say, I know Christina wanted to ask about psychopomps, and that's a word that we were coming across a lot lately. I had heard the word, but it's like my memory forgets quite easily. But we were interested. What can you tell us about that, psychopomps?
Sure.
Am I saying it right?
Yeah, no, you're saying it right. Psychopomp, indeed, yeah. So that's a fascinating, another huge topic in its own right. Psychopomp is from the Greek, so psychospirit, pomp to conduct, so guide. And it's one of the things that's a little unusual about shamanism, where we work to heal the dead as well as the living. To be fair, you can do that with other modalities as well, but it's one of the things that makes shamanic healing slightly different. What is going on here is that sometimes when humans die, they are dying in a state of shock. It's typically accidents or traumatic events. They don't have time to prepare for death properly, and they're confused about what's happened, and they inadvertently become stuck in the spiritual aspect of the middle world rather than going to where they should go, which is the upper world or the lower world, essentially. Heaven, think of it if you like. So those spirits wander around in the middle world. They have a negative impact on the living if you come into contact with them, and over time they tend to lose sentience and become more confused, and so they're essentially stuck, and that's not good. It's not good for them, it's not good for us. So psychopomp is concerned with locating those spirits, convincing them that they are sort of somewhere they shouldn't be, that you can help them, you can take them to a better place. You have to get permission from them to heal them. So this is that ethical dimension coming in again. You can't just take them. That would be wrong in some sense, even though you may feel it's in their best interest. We always try and get their permission to actually heal them. And if they give that, then we will actually take them where they're supposed to go and hand them over to whoever's waiting for them. So there's always somebody waiting to take them over. And depending on your own worldview or the spirit that you're healing through the psychopomp, that imagery may change. So sometimes it is quite religious imagery, where you are literally seeing angelic figures, you are seeing things that you would associate with the biblical view of heaven, and sometimes it's entirely different. If you're going to the lower world, you may see things that are more fairy or more power animal related. It's different each time, but it's very beautiful work, and it's something that some people are very strongly drawn to do. One of the favorite topics of people I teach, actually, so people really do resonate with that work. The interesting thing about psychopomp is, other than humans, we can also psychopomp other types of spirit. So, for instance, animals, or indeed plants, or indeed minerals. So all of those things have spirits and are sentient in an animistic worldview, and shamanism is animistic. So from that point of view, it's very broad, and we do some very interesting work with psychopomping whales, for instance, whale spirits that are stuck in the middle world that haven't transitioned to where they're supposed to go. I work with birds a lot when I'm doing that type of work, and I do that work on a fairly regular basis to sort of move birds who are stuck in the middle world to where they should go as well. So all of that energy, whatever its nature and whatever species it is just adding to this general overhang of energy in the middle world that affects us. It affects us in many ways through creating this energetic imbalance. You pick this stuff up in dreams or in other work you're doing. Some people are very sensitive to it, and it just affects them again more than others. So by doing this work, we're not only helping the spirits that are suffering, that are concerned, but we're also working to try and reduce this overhang of energy that affects everybody else in addition. So it's very powerful work, very beautiful work to do, and something that I spend a lot of time working on with people that I've taught and with colleagues that I work with.
And I know you mentioned shadow work before, and I'm just kind of curious, what are some of the things you do that induce that work? I mean, we all have obviously a dark side. I struggle with being a Capricorn. Like they try to say the tarot of the devil is the Capricorn, which not everybody believes that. But I'm like, come on, man, that's a bad rap. And then of course I'm Pan, which they stole a lot of the devil from. So, but what are some things that you could tell us about that more for people, that need to, if more people did shadow work, they probably wouldn't be, serial killers in prison, right?
Yeah, indeed.
Be more creative instead of, letting go to it, surrendering to it.
Sure. So let's briefly sort of go over why shadow work is necessary and how to do it. And there are some people that are very good authorities on this. So if people are really interested in shadow work, I could recommend Christina Pratt, who does the Why Shamanism Now podcast, and she is an authority in this area, and I could recommend her for that and other topics, to be honest. So shadow essentially is where we are repressing aspects of ourselves, and it's a well-known psychotherapeutic problem as well. And what is happening is that people outside of yourself, whether it's your family, your church, your community, or your work colleagues, are impressing on you that a certain type of behavior that you have is not acceptable in that context. And so what you then do is you suppress that in yourself in order to fit in, to win approval, to gain love, whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. Now, that's sort of okay in terms of that immediate setting, but what that does is it creates a dynamic tension within you, because those pieces are sort of bottled up, and those parts don't want to be, they want to be free, they want to be reintegrated fully with you. You suffer because you're not expressing those aspects of yourself, so you're missing out on things that you should be doing. So some of the things that very typically happen is in girls, that they are taught that they shouldn't express themselves, that they should not exhibit power, that they shouldn't be leaders in the world. And so that gets repressed, and that stops them doing certain things with their lives, which is very unfortunate. So the other, in men, it's things like creativity. So, you're a man, you shouldn't be drawing art things or doing other types of things that are not manly. And again, this is, an unfortunate sort of overhang of different types of thinking about what men and women are in the world and what they should be. So that's how it gets created. You have this tension. Now, how do you work with those things? So typically what you're doing is you are working with them by either journeying to them, or working with them in dream or in meditation or in guided visualization. So a number of ways you can do it. And you are trying to sort of get more acquainted with the pieces you've suppressed, to befriend them, to come into relationship with them, and to persuade them to actually come more fully into your consciousness and be part of you. And you're sort of saying to them that you are going to express them fully in the world. And the ways that typically people do that is you are expressing them, and you're expressing them publicly as well. So a lot of people do this with mask work or dance. That's one of the things that Christina teaches. I also use other creative forms where people are drawing paintings. Perhaps you're drawing a painting of the shadow part that's repressed as it is and as it may be in the future. You would then sort of have that to represent the parts, and when you fully integrate it, you get rid of the before and you keep the after more positive impression. Or indeed, you can write stories or poetry about what you feel about the part to express its nature and to encourage it to be with you. So that's a very quick overview of a very complex topic. You can also approach shadow work, obviously, through psychotherapy, and let's be clear. The advantage of doing this shamanically and to doing it from a more demonstrative and intuitive perspective is that you tend to be able to do the work more quickly. So that seems to be the conventional wisdom for that piece.
And I know right now with the way things are going, there's a lot of, we think we may have, empath situations. I don't know a lot about it. Christina's more into that than I am, but we think that, we may be, I guess everyone is maybe on some level, or I don't know, but we're feeling this stuff. The stuff that's going on with, Ukraine and all that craziness, like the Russia dude just threatened to nuke Ireland. That's scary. And then the COVID alone. Now it's monkeypox, which I saw some pictures of that stuff, and I'm like, my God, this feels like a horror movie. And we're feeling that stuff, and you have to shield yourself from it on some level. And I mean, there's different ways to do it. I know the sun thing helps me a lot. There's something, we had a guy on Micah Dank that got into like astrology and the sun being Christ and the walk of the planets and like the Jordan Maxwell kind of situation. And he showed a lot of pictures of like Jesus and different people from the Bible, and the sun was always there. So, I mean, to a lot of them, the sun is God. Or, I know the Watchtower, that Jehovah's Witness book, like I ran them off talking about UFOs and Bigfoot, but they left me that little book, and they had they had the sun in it, and it was a dude in a throne. So I'm like, so the sun's like a dude, like a god in a throne? There's something to the sun. But when we do these shows, I want to help the earth. And I think just doing these kind of shows does on some level and way raises consciousness. That's why I like this subject. That's why when I went through testicular cancer at 17 and lost one in the war, woke up from surgery and said, we took one, and I cried and then had to go through chemo. I came across shamanism, and I'd been raised Christian all my life, but shamanism answered things that couldn't all the time. And I just like to do these shows because I think it does help. But I mean, as far as the way the earth's going right now, and the way humanity treats it, and lately we've come across a lot of stuff with how humanity's treating animals, and signing those things where you write Congress and try to help. Like I had a little dog named Jack that I had a very long time, and he passed away, and it affected me because I was with him all the time. He was a beagle, a mix, and I was with him in the woods for years, a hermit, and I lost him, and I called him my dog son. And when he first started to get sick, I held him and I was crying, and we had another dog that passed away here, a white dog, Savannah. It was like Alaskan. It was my mom's, one of those big Alaskan white big jokers, but it passed. But we saw a light in the sky that night that was weird. And then Jack stayed a little longer, and then he finally passed. But there was some weird story about dogs similar to Jack being tested in labs, like crazy sick stuff. And like they're doing these tests on these poor dogs and making them drink poison. But we do the stuff to write Congress. I don't know if that stuff helps or not, but I would get so mad and feel the dark side that I prank called those places. And that's probably not the best thing to do, but I was rude to them, pranking them. And that was me trying to express, my dark side in a funny way, even though I was upset. But I mean, with the earth and everything and raising consciousness, what can you tell us about? I know you talk about earth work. I guess I want to get some props for the earth through you.
Yeah. So there is obviously a lot of negative stuff happening, and it does affect everybody. That's happened throughout history. So don't forget, our ancestors put up with stuff that was far worse than us in terms of infant mortality, the diseases that they faced, the wars. So things weren't always great in the past either. Things are bad now because they are potentially so dangerous, and obviously, threatening to use nuclear weapons is about as bad as it gets, and that stuff is nuts. And you hope that sane people will prevent that from actually happening in practice, which seems to be the case. What I would say is, first of all, it's important not to let it affect you. And the word you used was shielding, Jeffrey, and I agree that it's important to try and shield yourself from this. So the more that you stand in your own power, that you don't let this affect you, the more then you're able to help to sort of try and, as you say, raise consciousness or create this general sense that other people can then draw strength from. We're trying to all the time work towards what's known as ascension, this idea of raising consciousness, raising the energy of the planet, and hopefully a lot of this stuff then will improve. Some of the things that are happening are due to economic sort of cycles and economic situations and the impact that's going to have. So as resources run out, as food gets scarce, as climate change hits us, a lot of other stuff is going to get more difficult. And it's important to try and think about how we should position ourselves to react to that, how we work more with our local communities, how we engage with individuals to try and creatively help others in this situation, and maybe rethink the way that we live our lives to some extent as well. So one of the things I do and some of my friends do is try to think, what can we change, and not just avoiding things like plastic, but what else can we do to try and, purchase food that's locally produced, locally sourced, food that is maybe better for you as well in terms of, organics, etc. So there's a number of things that we can do to position ourselves relative to things that are happening in the world, and recognize that there are things that we don't have any direct control over. And no matter how much you lobby Congress, it's probably not going to do that much good directly. So the thing to do is then to focus on what can I do that's going to make a difference, and then sort of try and help other people who are better positioned to do other types of work, and collectively try and move it forward. One of the things I personally would like to see is more female representation at the high level in some of these power structures. So if you look at countries like New Zealand, Finland, Sweden, they're some of the most forward-looking, prosperous countries that have a high level, high standard of living, general satisfaction, and they're all run by female leaders. So it's an interesting coincidence. But I personally would like to see more female, feminine thinking into some of the decision making. And that's one way we avoid things like wars, and we avoid things like potential use of nuclear weapons, which would be disastrous for us all.
And I know the divine feminine is one of the things that you talk about a lot, is empowering women with that and the divine feminine.
Indeed, yeah. So in the sort of work that I do, you find that there's a distinction between males and females in terms of their ability to do shamanic work and to do shamanic journeying and other things that are very highly visionary and highly intuitive. And the simple truth is that the girls are better at it than the boys. They're more right-brained, they're more intuitive, they have this more latent ability to do this stuff at a higher level. I tend to find that most of my students are female, and I also quite like actually working with them to try and get them to be more empowered in the world in general. And I also do that in the professional environment in my past career, as well as do that shamanically. So it's something that's been a theme, if you like. It's one of my missions, I think. I had a mission from the church to help the poor. So those two things are things that I focus on. So working with the poor, working with female empowerment are the two things that I think are the key motifs for the spiritual work that I try and do.
And when it comes to men, we deal with that energy too, and we can integrate it in our life without getting too weird. You don't have to go Eddie Izzard or anything,
Exactly. Yeah.
I just saw a poster of a new movie he's doing, and I've seen him in different stuff. I know he's a stand-up comedian, and he was in that Hannibal show, which is really weird. And of course, Hannibal ate him. But anyway, he he was doing a Jekyll and Hyde movie, and I'm like, okay, he's a good actor, cool. I might check that out. But in it, he's a chick in a dress. Well, we're not going to get into that too heavily, but uh, what can men do to get into that energy without? And I know there's stuff with native stuff where they dressed up with women and walk backwards and stuff, but a lot of us men don't want to do that. If you do, it's okay. I guess I'm not going to judge, but I'm just curious from your point of view, what are ways that men can bring that? There's peace to it. And I agree,
Yeah, yeah,
men are
indeed.
brutal. I mean,
Yeah.
war,
So
apocalypse.
there's a long history in tribal cultures of, first of all, women being involved as shamans or medicine women or whatever term we want to use. It varies across cultures. There's also a lot of anecdotal evidence, and in the academic literature, you can see there's reference to different gender expressions, different sexuality expression, and indeed male practitioners sort of dressing and living as women and indeed marrying men. So this stuff is, and transvestitism sort of goes with this space, if you like. So that's normal in terms of more older tribal shamanic societies. I just want to sort of first of all say about men that obviously I do work with men, but the men I work with tend to be not normal men. So they tend to be healers, teachers, or warriors of one sort or another, or they're very high level sports people. Is the other people that I sort of tend to see. So they're not normal. They are sort of working in a space that is not the normal expression of masculinity that you associate with what you see, day to day. Um, I think one of the shames of this is that men can't sort of feel that they can express themselves and get in touch with their feminine side, and that is very important. And there is nothing negative about that. There's wonderful benefits from men being in touch with their feminine aspects and being more real men in the world. So there's nothing contradictory in this at all. So I have no issue with that. I have no issue with understanding, exploring my feminine side and recognizing you have this duality within you, and you have to work with the spectrum of all the parts of your nature. Otherwise, you can't fully express yourself. You're not going to be able to help the range of people that you should. With men, they get a lot of conditioning from society, from their families, from schools, that men behave in a certain way. And that is one of the things that it would be nice if we could change and we could allow men to express a different range of emotions, of feelings, of expressions of what maleness is in the world, and that they could actually fulfill, their true role rather than some of the roles they get pigeonholed in at the moment, which is unfortunate and doesn't help collectively.
And I just want to say that it's amazing that Christina hasn't dropped. She's in the RV, and earlier it was dropping all the time. We said a prayer for it not to drop. So far, so good. Hopefully that doesn't mess
Right, that's
things up.
worked.
Me
There we are.
saying it.
Yeah.
And it was the first time we were doing it from the RV, and you have to get used to the signal and all that stuff. But so far, so good. Maybe it stays better when you're actually doing the show instead of no one just inactive or something. I don't know. But I know when it comes to shamanism, I grew up with certain ones. Michael Harner was one, but his books. Was it? I always have trouble saying his name, and I've interviewed him. Jose Stevens. Yes, he's been on. Serge Kahali King, Huna, the Hawaiian
Mm.
Way. And I've had Don Ruiz Jr. Uh, and those are books I came across. And for me, the only way to get that kind of fix was through a book. I was in Georgia. I didn't know there's any shamans around Georgia. They may have been, but the books were the way to do it. But I'm just kind of curious, who were some of the ones that you first got introduced with? And I know Michael, he's passed. I had that Cave and Cosmos book, I know, and it's his first book. And I'm just curious, maybe we can give them some respect that we grew up with. Who are some of the ones that you grew up with?
Sure. So very similar to you. Obviously, I read Where the Shaman, which was Michael Harner's book, and that broke a lot of things loose for modern people, looking at shamanism. So the anthropologists, obviously, who'd been in contact with tribal people, who were well aware of this stuff, and people who really specialized in the area always knew this was going on. I think Harner helped to bring a lot of this more to the public consciousness, and there were other people writing at the same time. Obviously, Castaneda was one. Castaneda is slightly under a cloud to some extent at the moment, but did sort of raise this topic in the consciousness, and people were interested in what's going on in with that. Maybe we need to look at some of that stuff as well. So I think yes, I would definitely say Harner. Obviously, you've got some very good teachers in the US, especially as well, and then people working there. So apart from the individuals you mentioned, Alberto Villaldo, who's head of the Four Winds Society. So the Four Winds with the Foundation for Shamanic Studies, the Society for Shamanic Practitioners are probably the main groups. And if people are interested in stepping into the topic, I would say go and look at their websites, and they always advertise people that they recommend as teachers in particular areas. And so whatever state you're in, you're going to find a bunch of people that will be recommended on those sites, who are people that have undertaken their training, that have been initiated in shamanic work, so they're able to teach properly. And that's a good source. Other than that, you can also go to some of the individual teachers. So people like Sandra Ingemann, very well known, obviously. She also lists teachers, people that she's trained on her site. Betsy Bergstrom, one of my favorite teachers, actually, wonderful teacher. Christina Pratt, I mentioned earlier. And what I would say is explore online in your area, and you'll certainly find resources there. And increasingly, you're also seeing more online workshops and online training. Now, that doesn't completely displace the need for being in contact with human teachers. And of course, most of the teaching is actually done by spirits anyway. But the online training is useful. That's an easy way for people to become acquainted with not just shamanism, but other subjects as well. And then find out what sort of spiritual path appeals to them, calls to them, that then they can step into.
Definitely. And it's interesting how we grow up, with these books and learn from it. And for you personally, when you first started, or did you come across other shamans in your area, or was it through books at first?
So I live in Hong Kong, and in Hong Kong we don't have too many shamans, although there are shamanic traditions in the Chinese culture, in the Taoist religion in particular, and also in Buddhism, to be honest. So no, I didn't directly have it. I flew to California to do training initially with the foundation. I spent a lot of time in North America. I spent some time in South America, in different parts of Asia, different parts of Europe, in Australia and New Zealand. So I've traveled a lot, meeting local practitioners, whether they're shamans or they're called something else, understanding how they work, seeing the different ways things are done across cultures. And of course, what Harner did was to abstract the cultural specific things into a transversal set of rituals, which he called core shamanism. And that's useful, because then if you're doing that, you're not really guilty of cultural appropriation, because they're things that are generally widely used. Appropriation of things, trying to do a pipe ceremony if you're not a pipe carrier, would just be incorrect to do. Maybe taking ayahuasca outside of its proper context in South America, possibly not recommended, because there's a lot involved with that, and people literally are working in a tradition that they are, and it's part of their ancestry. They're training all their lives to do that work. They're working with a group of spirits, and people that are dabbling in that don't always appreciate the depth of some of the stuff that's going on there, perhaps.
Definitely. And I know you talk about shamanic tools. And I remember reading in Michael Harner's book, he would talk about drumming, and they would talk about these experiences. I was like, that's just from drumming and not psychedelics. Like, some of them were pretty out there. Like, they would travel to, I'm just kind of curious, what are some of these tools, and do you think drumming is that powerful? I like drumming. I like a lot of the Norse stuff as well. That's, drumming and stuff like that. But what do you think? What are some of the tools, and is drumming really that powerful?
Sure. So a lot of those guys were in the 60s, so I'm sure there was some psychedelics going on as well. But the simple answer is that no, you don't need to take any form of sort of psychotropic drug to do this work. You can do it with what are called sonic drivers. And there is actually a sort of scientific basis for this. So when we are getting into an altered state of consciousness that allows us to experience spirit and travel to different realms and work with spirits, we are putting our sort of brain into a state that's known as theta. So this is very similar to the state you're in just before you fall asleep or just before or after you've woken up, where you often see this very vivid imagery. I don't know if you experienced that. I very often see that. And if you focus on it, you can actually go into it. It's like going into a film and actually being within a film. So that's actually very similar to the journey state. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to use certain frequencies to entrain our brains to go into this theta state that allows us then to experience that journey state. Or the same similar thing is happening with other ways of working as well. You can also do it through posture work. Felicitas Goodman was the anthropologist that pioneered that, where if you put your body into a certain posture, you experience a particular state of consciousness that's unique to the posture, which is very interesting. So that's another way of doing it that doesn't involve sonic drivers. And apart from drumming, which is very powerful, then you can also use, a lot of people use rattles, a lot of people will use chanting, which has got that repetitive element. So it's this doing things at a certain frequency again that is very important. People will use singing, dancing, and things like songs can also carry power, carry healing energy. So combination of these things where you're working with different repetitive sonic sounds, you're working in low light, you're working in ceremonial context, you are expecting something to happen because you know that you're doing ritual work. The spirits are interested because they know what's going on. So you're creating the right setting, as you would say, from a psychedelic experience in a ritual context, and you're creating all the things that actually allow you to step into that altered state of consciousness. So no, you don't need the drugs to do it. The drumming works very well, and the drumming will work if you're experiencing live drumming, or indeed if you're listening to that through an app or from some other online source. But with the drumming, the key thing to do is to listen to it through stereo headphones, to try and be in a darkened room, or to wear a blindfold of some sort, probably to lie down if you're sort of beginning this. And it's very easy for most people then to have these types of experience. Most people would start to encounter visionary stuff when they do shamanic journeying. So vision is the primary sense for about 70% of the population. Some people, though, don't see things. They tend to feel it a bit more. But most people will have some sort of reaction to that. It's very rare not to be able to journey. And one of the main reasons is that people are actually blocking the experience. So you have this contradictory behavior where people want to do certain types of work, but they're also slightly nervous about it and they're not sure. And so they will actually block that from happening. And we see that a lot with certain types of work. And so one of the things to do is then to encourage people to fully step into things, to not be apprehensive or to be afraid of things. And in that way, then they can begin to experience whatever it is that we're trying to get them to do. So shamanic journeying with drumming is probably the best entry point, and it's the most widely used across cultures. Journeying is not the only way of doing the work, though. As I said, you can use postures. The other main type of work is spirit embodiment, where people are voluntarily being possessed, in quotes, by spirits. And so in cultures like Mongolia, that is the way that work is done rather than journeying per se, although they're still using drums and they're using rattles and metal objects on their costumes to create this sonic landscape that also helps to, as I said, put you into that altered state.
And I know I remember in that Horner book there was some drumming story, and it was just talking about journeying and things like that. And drumming's definitely interesting, but I mean, I've had some experiences with it, but for some reason, psychedelics seem to hit you a lot harder. And I've done DMT and stuff like that. It's been a while, and I've had some interesting experiences on that. But as far as some of the other stuff that lasts a long time, I'm afraid to do that stuff now because of blood pressure stuff. And I'm older, 47 now. I'm not in my 20s anymore. And some of that stuff will freak you out, man, for sure. Uh, Christina, do you have anything else you want to ask that you can think of? Just let me know. And so far, so good. No drop carriers. So we
Yeah,
must be tuning into the frequency.
exactly.
Luckily.
So one of the other things we can maybe talk about is power, which is a very important topic. And a lot of people feel disempowered, and obviously people lose their power in any number of ways. So they tend to give their power away to other people, or power is taken from them. This happens a lot in the workplace, of course, where people are disempowering others, draining power from them with some of the behavior that's going on. And this has a very bad effect on people. It leads to sort of physical illness, obviously, apart from anything else. And obviously, people are just depressed by experiencing that on a regular basis. So this is quite common, that people are disempowered by, the workplace, or other things they encounter on a regular basis in life. You can be disempowered by negative experiences that you have, by the stories that other people tell about you. So, you're never going to be any good, you're never going to be able to do X, whatever it is. And that has an effect on people if they hear it, repeatedly, especially when that starts when you're very young. So, children are often told that you're never going to be this, you're never going to be any good. And that is very highly disempowering and sets them up for problems later in life, partly as a result of being disempowered. You can also lose parts of your energy. So we spoke about soul loss earlier. That is one big reason why power goes. So when you lose that soul part, you lose some of your energy, you lose some of your memories, you lose some of your abilities that typically are associated with that part as well. So that's why soul retrieval is a very powerful healing, because you're bringing multiple different types of things back. And if you sort of are working in certain types of society, or you go on holiday somewhere exotic, you can also inadvertently breach taboos in locations. So if you go on holiday to the Caribbean or Central America, and you do things that are frowned upon by the local population or the local spirits, then you can certainly experience power loss there, often as a result of curse work and similar things. So a very large number of ways that power can be lost, and then that actually it means that you're more susceptible to lose more power over time. You're at the mercy of people who want to take power from you. You find it difficult to move on in your life, to fulfill your life purpose. So there's a whole bunch of things that come together. So power is one of the fundamental things, and one of the first things that we teach people after basic sort of training is how to actually acquire power, and how to stop giving your power away or stop losing power. And one of the main ways we do this is through the appropriately named power animals. One of the main things that the power animals give you is power. And if you have a power animal retrieve for you, you're closely associated and work with that animal, you will take on power aspects of that animal and the way that animal behaves. So if we think about animals like the wolf or the bear, they are incredibly powerful. They're exhibiting different aspects of power, different from the way an animal like deer would exhibit power, which obviously is a prey animal, not a predator, but they are very powerful as well. And deer and bear are the two main animals that people who are on a healing path would have as their power animals. So all of these animals are specific, but they all give you power of different types. Other spirits can also empower you either directly, or they will intermediate between you and power sources. So if I'm, for instance, working with a person, I can pass power to them through spirit, either by collecting the power from the spirit and giving it to them, hands-on healing, same way Jesus did, or by indeed merging with a spirit and then allowing that spirit to more directly pass power to the individual. In both cases, you're working as a facilitator. You're not doing the healing. So the healing is being done by spirit in that case. And this empowerment is I always use in any form of healing, and it's one of the key sort of rituals that I would do with any client, to be honest with you. You can also acquire power in journeys or in dreams. So you may go on a journey to explore this alternate reality or to do some other task, but at the same time, you may actually receive power, you may receive healing, you may even be initiated by spirits in journeys. The other key sources, things like power sources and dances, songs and dances, sorry. So power songs are given to you by spirit, and again, they're used in a healing context. They are very, very powerful, very nice way of working. In South America, they use terms like Icaros to describe these, and they're very common there. So power songs, power objects, which either contain power themselves or connect you to power. And this is things like feathers, rocks, crystals, not just the tools like wands, etc. They are very useful things, very widely used. Working with the elements are a fundamental power source in any type of spiritual tradition. So if you're doing any form of Wiccan work or ceremonial magic, the elements are always involved there, and certainly in shamanic work as well. So the elements are a fundamental source of power. Whenever we do ceremony, we're calling in elements, we're calling in directions, and they are bringing power into the circle that then we're going to use for our rituals. The other thing that you can do is to be in nature. And one of the things I always suggest to people is to spend more time in nature. I try and spend at least one day in nature every week. And if I'm in the forest, then there's a number of benefits going on. First, you're in a very high oxygen rich environment. You are experiencing some of the sort of benefits that you get from being in contact with nature spirits, especially the trees. And in general, I just find that a very good way to relax and get more context on what is happening when you're actually not in nature or not in wilderness. The wilderness is even better. And then that leads on to certain types of rituals like medicine walk, vision quest, etc., which are very powerful, very initiatory in their scope. And again, they involve sort of fundamental power acquisition. So I think for me, if people are wondering about what's the best way to do this work and what are some of the benefits, I would say that empowerment is one of the main ones. And you don't need to get that through shamanism. You can do that other ways, obviously, but it's one thing to bear in mind is whatever I'm doing, I should be looking at how can I empower myself from this? What are the tools and rituals available? And look for people to teach you and to even sort of lead rituals where you receive empowerment. A very, very basic way of proceeding that is incredibly useful.
And these are things that, let's say, for instance, you're having a day where you feel really tired or exhausted. Those things that you do to tap into that source, to tap into that energy. I do things like I am that I am the light of the sun. Affirmations help me a lot, but some days you're like, man, those don't seem like they're doing anything. But the white light with the sun, I mean, what are things that you do to shield yourself or to tap in when you're having a day that feels like blah?
Sure. So one of the ways that most practitioners work is, first of all, you're making sure you're grounded continuously. And that's a basic mistake a lot of people make. So if you're not grounded, you can't do anything else. So it's a prerequisite for any other form of work. To be grounded, you have to be centered. So usually your energy is sort of scattered around you. A lot of your thoughts are drifting about wherever they are. And if you are not centered, you're not particularly stable, you're not focused, you're not really able to ground properly. So the first thing to do is to call that energy back to yourself, to somewhere you regard as your center, to then ground. And then from that space, you can then work with energy. And one of the common visualizations that people use is sending energy they don't need to the earth and pulling energy back from the earth to replace that energy, or indeed doing the same with the sun, or doing both of those things so that you're exchanging energy with the earth and with the sun and with the stars. And in this way, you're retrieving different types of energy. So you mentioned earlier, Jeffrey, that the sun is often viewed as has a male deity with it, which is common. There are female solar deities as well, but typically the sun is regarded as male and the earth is regarded as female. So from that perspective, you're also working with this male-female polarity by doing that sort of work as well. You can then work on shielding. Shielding implies you need protection. People don't always need protection. And again, this is one of these fear aspects creeping in, that I need to be protected before I can do anything. Not necessarily true, but learning about basic shielding or other energetic practices like cord cutting, where you are severing connections to people or past events that are not in your interest to maintain, or indeed cultivating, strengthening, or implementing cords with more positive things, other ways that you can proceed there to sort of do that work. So there's a number of different types of work that we can do to try and work with energy, which is basic work before we even start doing things that are shamanic or that are from another particular path. So essentially, yeah, all of those things I would recommend. I would also, though, say to people, don't feel that you need to be protected all the time. A lot of people are very scared to do certain types of work because they feel that, something bad must happen to them, and if they don't have the protection or know how to protect themselves, they shouldn't do it. I would say, try not to feel that way. Take sensible, basic precautions, and obviously understand what you're getting into. But don't be afraid to experiment with some of this stuff.
And when it comes to cord cutting, I've seen stuff where you like ask Archangel Michael to help you and things like that. What are some of the things that you do to do cord cutting? Uh, and it's like people do kind of put psychic hooks in you. And I know I've read different books about different things about it, but let's say you want a cord cut. How do you normally go about that?
Yeah, so there's a wonderful book by Mary Shutan with related to, I can't remember the title, but it's to do with cord management, and that's a wonderful book actually. She did a really good job with that. So essentially, you're right that the cords can attach themselves in different ways to you. So some of the cords are natural and they belong to you, and you don't get rid of them anyway. Other cords are implemented, and some of them are benign, some of them are malignant, and some of them are implemented intentionally, and some of them are inadvertently. So there's a whole range of different things going on. If you journey to look at the cords rather than ask Michael, who's quite overworked in this sense, to deal with them for you, then what you often see is the cords appear in either a positive manner, so they're glowing with golden light if they're things that are benevolent and should be there, and if they're not, they appear as dark or gnarly or negative in some sense, and they're attached with hooks or suckers or other things that you could sort of view as sort of negative. And so it's from that point of view, just the appearance of the cords gives you a good indication of how you should maybe proceed and which ones you don't need. Many different ways of removing them. If you do remove them, you want to always make sure you remove the attachment that the cord has, as well as the cord itself. And then obviously, the more that you empower yourself, the less likely that you are to be corded to in any case. And the more likely you are that you can push those cords out yourself and stop that from happening. A common way of getting rid of some of the minor cords is if you are doing shielding of some form, you're creating some energetic shield, not from your own energy, by the way, but from other energy, such as the earth or the sun, to then extend the shield beyond your body and have the intention that it's going to dissolve those cords as it goes. And that will get rid of some of the minor ones. It won't deal with some of the stronger cords, but again, you can see a specialist practitioner who can actually do that work for you or teach you how to do it yourself. But that is a very good way of sort of dealing with energy loss. I didn't answer your question earlier, Jeffrey. I'll just go back to that. The way that I deal with empowerment is by being grounded continuously and doing ritual on a daily basis. I'm working at a certain level of power and energy anyway. So I don't feel disempowered, although if I'm doing certain types of work in the real world, then yes, you can experience sort of situations where your power takes a bit of a dip. And I would usually just call on one of the deities I work with or one of my power animals to merge with me, and it will just give you that boost of power immediately. So the power animals can provide power in that sense. They, in some way, act as bodyguards almost as well, which is an interesting role. Their other main role, by the way, is to transport you in the spirit world and to introduce you to other people who offer things that they don't do for you. So they introduce you to teachers, for instance. So different ways of doing this work related to power, and lots to explore out there. A lot of it you can do yourself, and other stuff. It's always useful, to seek people who are experienced in that area to deal with some of the stuff that you may not be aware of or may not be able to deal with yourself. So some of the cords that are ancestral in nature or relate to past relationships where you're still corded to the person, is sort of something that you may not be able to do yourself. And sometimes the cord is removed, sometimes it doesn't need to be removed, but maybe it needs to be, its location needs to change. So very often you find that you're corded in the genital area to people, and that's an inappropriate cord. And by moving the cord from that area of the body to, say, your midsection or the heart, that then forms a more positive cord. So again, there's different ways of working with this. So cord management in and of itself is quite a big topic as well. So.
And I know in situations like Christina, for instance, doing nurse work, you come across other people's energy. And I know healers and stuff who deal with like the Reiki and, whatever, where they do healing. That stuff can kind of stick with you, that the darkness or negative from other people. And is that where cord cutting comes in? Is there other ways to try to get rid of that weirdness, that energy that you can gather up from other people?
Yeah, so this is an occupational hazard of all carers, as Christina knows, I'm sure. And you first of all, being aware that that's a possibility is useful. A lot of people who set themselves up as healers don't understand that they can be disempowered or pick up energy from the people they're trying to help. So they have great intentions, but they don't understand they're making themselves sick potentially in the process. So being aware of it is item number one. How can you deal with it? By being more empowered yourself, you're making it less likely that you're going to be affected by it. So that's point number one. The other thing that you can do is to make sure that you have the intention that you are not going to sort of be affected by things, or you're not going to put your energy into any sort of process as well. So this is another common problem. Some people who are doing healing will just inadvertently use their own energy, or in sometimes consciously use their own energy, because they believe that as the healer that's the right way to proceed. And of course it's not, because all they're doing is they're depleting their own energy. Their healing may or may not be effective, but they're certainly having a negative impact on themselves. So and with people who are carers, it's very natural to want to help the other people, and sometimes that extends to them inadvertently trying to give their energy to try and sort of heal or comfort the people that they're responsible for. So that's something to bear in mind, that it's not always the best way of proceeding. The other things you can think about are how to just clear yourself as well. So clear yourself sort of before you go into that environment, so you're not bringing things into that situation. And then when you've finished your sort of shift or work day, to then clear yourself as well, so that you're removing some of the energy from you. And whether you're doing that through saging or floral sprays or any of these means, that is going to have some positive effect just in and of itself. Obviously, you can then pick up other forms of energy from people. Let's look at some of the more weirder cases. So it's not impossible that individuals are being possessed by one or more spirits, and then that spirit can jump from that person to you. So that's the sort of radical thing that could happen. That's not that common, so don't worry about that. But if that does happen, then again, work can be done to remove those spirits from you. And there are lots of people out there that are trained to do that sort of work. And whether it's depossession or whether it's other means of getting rid of the spirits, it's certainly possible to address it through that as well. So a number of different ways of approaching it, a number of different things that can happen. Awareness is key. Intention not to give your power away is very important. Taking sensible sort of precautions to make sure you're clearing energy off of you to the extent that you can will help as well. So I hope that's of some use. Obviously, there's a lot of different things that can go wrong in that context. So you can't just say, yeah, just do these things and it'll be okay. It's going to vary a little bit depending upon the situation of the person. But hopefully some of the basics will help in general anyway.
Like I've seen books mention like when people leaving like astral weapons in you, like when they attack you and strange things like that. Is that something that you come across or deal with? Like, I forget the lady's name, but I've had her on before. She has a book with affirmations and things like that. But like they call them like weird, like I don't know. It's kind of creepy. Is that something that comes up? Like when you get a wound from somebody, it's like a weapon almost or something.
Yeah, so that's something we see in the tribal cultures and other societies where that's quite common. They're often referred to in South American traditions. They'll talk about magical darts being used in this manner, and so they're being directed to the person and entering their energy body. That's just one example of one of many types of intrusion that can actually get into your energy body, which is the other way that this starts affecting you. So that's spiritual energy essentially, and that spiritual energy often has a negative symbol. So it looks like a weapon, or it looks like a dark color, or it looks like an insect. Those are sort of common symbology associated with that type of intrusion. The way that we deal with those is through a healing modality called extraction healing, and there are many different ways that's done. So traditionally, people would suck those things out of you. That carries some danger because you can inadvertently take that energy into your body. And so the practitioners often took precautions, and they would put tobacco wedges in their mouth when they were doing that work, because tobacco is very attractive to spirits. And so if that spirit energy they inadvertently took into them, it would be trapped in the tobacco and then they would spit it out. You can do the extraction healing without doing the sucking, and there are several ways of doing that. But what you are essentially doing is you're identifying where that intrusion is in the body, and then you're removing it. And you're typically doing that in conjunction with a healing spirit who you're merged with, that is offering you protection from that energy as well. And then you are disposing of it in an appropriate way. In the South American tradition, there's a process called illumination healing, which is the same sort of thing, but you're dealing with it in a different way. In that sense, you're working with solar energy, again, which you're bringing in through your 8th chakra, and you're using that to dissolve those intrusions. So slightly different ways of working with them, whether we're physically extracting it, dissolving it in situ, but it all comes under that broad term of extraction healing.
And there's one thing that I've always found fascinating is the trickster element in a lot of the different cultures with shamanism that they bring up, like coyote. Like I have a lot of those folklore books. Those are some weird things, but they're fun to read, but very weird. Is that something that comes up in your studies a lot? Do you with the trickster energy?
Yeah, indeed, and some of those stories are wonderful. You know, they're morality tales usually, and you see them in all cultures, and it's usually the same animals in all cultures as well. So apart from coyotes and foxes, it's rabbits, obviously. That's where Brer Rabbit comes from, or Bugs Bunny, and we also see this in spiders, which is the other animal that is commonly mentioned here. Tricksters you also see in mythology. So Loki and these other characters exhibit this trickster behavior, and tricksters people sometimes view as negative. They're not. They're teachers, so they are teaching us something quite fundamental that we need to know, and showing us different ways of approaching things. So the tricksters in mythology often help humanity by doing things like stealing fire from the gods, which doesn't always end well for them. They are sort of beneficial in some sense to us, and we should look to tricksters as primarily being educators. People who have a trickster power animal, I always impress upon them, this is a great opportunity to work with not just the animal, but with the trickster aspect of it as well. There's potentially additional wisdom you can gain from that route. And yeah, we see tricksters in literally in all cultures. So a lot of this stuff is completely global. It's transversal across all peoples, and the trickster work is fascinating. And we do particular types of ritual to try and introduce ourselves to tricksters, work with them, use them in particular ritual contexts. So there's a lot of specialist stuff that we do with them. But yeah, interesting things to work with, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And Coyote is definitely fascinating. And the way I have some animal cards and stuff where he's in it, and they tell the story and supposedly brought fire to humanity and different
That's
stories
right.
like that.
Yeah.
And it's definitely fascinating. I had a guest on the show, a native lady, and her friend made this coyote like shawl for me that I have. That's pretty cool. There's also some DJ Conway chant that I've used for coyote, and I probably did it too much, like I was a superhero or something, chanting it anytime I got in trouble. I had to stop doing that. I got too rough. I think it's trickster, shape changer, keep me from danger, cunning magician, show me your ways of magical fire, powers much higher, lead me to new life, brighten my days. It's kind of like my weird superhero chant I've had to stop doing so much it gets you in trouble. But that's DJ Conway, I think in one of her books, Animal Magic. It's pretty fascinating. Oh, another thing I was going to tell you, we saw that Northman movie, The Northman. Really good, but brutal, and it's got the berserkers in it, and one of the Skarsgård brothers. He's the brother to one of the guys that played the It. I know his dad's an actor. They're all from Sweden, but really good, but definitely brutal, too brutal, but it's good. But there's a lot of imagery of the Norse, like Odin and stuff in it, and the Valkyries, and it's definitely a good watch. But there are some scenes in it you're like, oh, that's too much. But that guy's did some pretty interesting movies. The Witch, that's pretty weird about
Yep.
the black goat and all that stuff. He's supposed to be doing a Nosferatu, which he's having trouble making that one for some reason. But he also did The Lighthouse with that William Dafoe and Robert Pattinson
Yeah,
going
that was a good
insane.
film.
That
Yeah.
was crazy.
Mm.
Passing wind in the lighthouse and mermaids. But yeah, but really good. But if you can see The Northman, it
Yeah.
was really good as well. That guy's a
Yeah.
good filmmaker. I hope he pulls off Nosferatu, but last I heard he was having some difficulty for some reason with that one. I would like to see another Nosferatu though, for sure. I know.
What's really interesting is the way that this Norse culture is coming through now in the Marvel films, obviously, and it resonates deeply with people. And obviously, a lot of people in the US have European roots that are either from Scandinavia, from Northern Britain, from Germany. So they have this; it's in their blood, and it resonates with them. It's really interesting to see that sort of take off, and people actually becoming much more interested in it. And you've got the new religion, Sartre, of course, which is the modern day sort of Viking religion from Iceland, that is also has an equivalent in the US. There's a sister religion to it, but very fascinating to see some of the old stuff coming back and people adopt it.
And we just saw some of those countries, the Vikings, rise up against the Putin situation with NATO and all that. That was pretty fascinating. Joining NATO, I think Finland, and I forget who else, but I have some Scandinavian in my DNA. It's not as much as I'd like, but it's there. But Ireland and all that, the Vikings hit there. They hit Europe. They're everywhere, man. They hit the crap out of everybody. They're fascinating. So even if you have those, you have Vikings on some level in your blood. I love that kind of history. I like the show Vikings, even though it's kind of over dramatic with a lot of things. But the Northman's better for sure. What's another one? The Last Kingdom. That's pretty good. That's the one based on the Bernard Cornwell books and everything. That's pretty good. I need to watch the newest season of that. I know what I wanted to ask you. This is your first book, right? Is this your first book?
Yeah, it's the first book. So I've been writing it for a while, actually. It took about 5 years to put that together, but it was done over time because I'm using the experiences of people that have been at my workshops, and so it takes time to cover that amount of territory. There is a second book that's written already, actually. So if the first one sells, then we'll probably push that one out as well.
I have some I've wrote. It's hard once you haven't done it for a while to do it. It's grueling. I haven't done it in years, and it's just a pain in the butt. But I'm glad that you finally got yours, and you got Llewellyn. That's a big find. Did it take a while to get a publisher, and then it hit? How was that experience?
Yeah, that was quite unexpected, actually. You know, I've been working on the book for a while, and I thought I either need to finish this off or just stop working on it because it was taking up a lot of time. So I quickly finished it and thought I'll send it off and get it rejected, and then I can still stop this stuff. And I sent it to Llewellyn, and they said, yeah, we like this, we'd like to publish it. So that was a bit of a surprise, to be honest with you. And they're a wonderful publisher, obviously, and the people there are great to work with. They really are. Of course, if you do get a book published, that's just the start of it, because then you need to rewrite it a couple of times. So that also takes some time, because typically your book is being positioned to be published in a pipeline that's 12 to 18 months in the future. And there's a lot of stuff you need to tidy up in the book. Each time you read your own work, as you know, Jeffrey, you see things in it, you think, oh God, what did I do that for? And you want to improve it. And that process can go on forever. So it's a case of, trying to know when to stop and then get it out the door if it's in a suitable state. One of the things I wanted just to say is that people who are interested in writing books, that again, doing work like shamanic work gives you all sorts of wonderful resources to get input into writing. So not just connecting to muse type spirits, but there are some wonderful things you can do, like journeying to see your book, journeying to discuss with the spirit of the book what it's about, how you should write it, etc. Journeying to the characters in the book, journeying to read reviews of the book once it's been published, to get ideas about it. Now, and people think, well, that's cheating, surely, if you do that sort of thing. But when you wrote the book in the first place, it's not actually. So there's a number of different ways you can think about creativity with this spiritual work as well, that leads into this and encourages you to do stuff. So I do a lot of work with people who are doing writing, and convince them to sort of try different ways, and it seems to work very well, actually. So what I would say to people is, if you're stuck, maybe think about a different way of proceeding, and don't just stay stuck, but try something else, and try and think of some different ways of moving forward, or different ways to getting input into the creative process, and pay attention to what's happening in your dreams as well, because that's a wonderful opportunity to get ideas, and it's a place where spirit will put things into the dream for you to see. So there are some wonderful resources you can do through dream work as well in creativity.
And it's been great having you on. The book is Shamanism, Your Personal Journey to Healing and Self-Discovery. Mark Nelson, do you have any links you want to give out or anything?
So if people want to find out more about me, they can get me at marknelson.io, which is my personal website. We'll be having some other things coming out later in the year, but that's the best place to, if you want to get in touch with me. And by all means, if anybody has any questions, you can contact me at that site, and I'm more than happy to talk to people, give them referrals to others where I can't help them directly. I'm trying to be in the US next year. I'll certainly make a point of getting in touch with you, Jeffrey, and popping by to see you if I can. So I'm going to be in Florida and Georgia, so we'll try and make that happen.
Cool. And it's been a pleasure having you on. It's great to have you in our Shamanism Hall of Fame. I always love doing these interviews, and we appreciate it. If you do any remote healing and want to send us a thunderbolt our way, please do. A zap. We could use it.
Will do.
That's for
Will
sure.
do.
And I appreciate it. And thanks so much, and keep me in the loop. We'll definitely get you on again for sure in the future. Thanks so much, Mark.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Christina. Very nice to meet you. Good luck with your work. And thanks, Jeffrey. Nice to be on.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. Thanks to Christina. It's amazing she didn't drop. We did say a prayer and stood in the sun and let that light fill us before we started. And I was like, please don't let it drop. And it didn't. So it was doing it like crazy. So that's pretty miraculous. But we appreciate it. Have a good one, everybody. Have a good weekend. Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Night.
Take care, Mark. I'll be in touch. Take care.
Okay.